We begin with some breaking news tonight. A man who has spent more than 12 years in prison is free tonight. Robert Davis walked out of the Coffeewood Correctional Center in Culpeper, where he's been serving time for a double murder conviction.
After his attorney spent years arguing he was forced into a confession, Governor Terry McAuliffe agreed and pardoned him today. Courteney Stuart joins us now from the Satellite Center with more. Courtney?
Thanks, Dan and Sefe. A huge day for Robert Davis, who's now 31 and a free man for the first time since he was a teenager. He was just 18 when he was arrested for murdering a Crozet mother and her 3-year-old son. He and his attorneys have spent years trying to correct what they say was a miscarriage of justice. 3 teenagers, including Robert Davis, were convicted for the 2003 murders of Nola Charles and her 3-year-old son William, whose bodies were found in their burned home on Kling Lane in Crozet. Charles was bound to the bed with duct tape and stabbed. William died of smoke inhalation. Siblings Jessica and Rocky Fugit implicated Robert Davis, who was 18 at the time. He confessed after a 5-hour interrogation by Albemarle County Police. Legal experts have called it a textbook false confession. And the Fugits, who both remain in prison, have filed sworn statements that they lied about Davis's involvement in the crime. Now, Davis had previously filed a request for clemency with Governor Bob McDonnell, but his office did not review the file. According to Davis's attorney, Steve Rosenfield, Governor McAuliffe examined the file and issued a conditional pardon. That allowed Davis to be released from prison today, but the conviction is still on his record. Live in the Newsplex, Courtney Stuart, CBS 19 News.
A Crozet man accused of killing 2 people in a crash back in April, pleading guilty in Augusta County. 61-year-old Kenneth Barber entered his plea to 2 counts of aggravated involuntary manslaughter. 44-year-old Sandra Martin and her 12-year-old daughter Haley Martin were killed when a vehicle driven by Barber slammed into their car on Route 250 near Stanton. Court records say Barber's blood alcohol level 2 times the state's legal limit to drive. Continuing coverage tonight, we're taking a deeper look at the Robert Davis case. Davis, the man who was pardoned yesterday by Governor Terry McAuliffe for his convictions in a 2003 double murder in Crozet. At the heart of the Davis pardon, the interrogation by Albemarle County Police. It got him sent to jail and ultimately helped him win his freedom. Courtney Stuart joins us now with more. Courtney?
Thanks, Dan. It's hard to imagine why someone innocent of a crime would confess, but I spoke with an expert in false confessions who says that's just what happened in the Robert Davis case.
When Governor Terry McAuliffe issued a pardon for Robert Davis, he cited problems with the interrogation by Albemarle County Police as one of the reasons.
If you cooperate with me, then I can work with the Commonwealth and say that you cooperate with me. But son, if you don't cooperate with me, then I can't do that. And then I can't tell your mom that I can save you from the ultimate.
Stephen Drizzen is an expert in false confessions. He says the Davis interrogation is a classic case of police believing a suspect is guilty and going to great lengths to coerce a confession.
That belief drives them during the interrogation to use increasingly aggressive, hostile, and coercive tactics against the suspect.
Davis, who had denied involvement in the slayings of 41-year-old Nola Charles and her 3-year-old son William dozens of times, sounded increasingly desperate as the interrogation went on.
Your mom would have known am I the killer? Is that what people say? Am I the killer? I don't want to say that you are. Okay? Please tell me. No, you're not the only one. No, you're not the only one. You're not the only one. I know that. You're not the only one. I didn't kill nobody. I know you're not the only one.
And later, Davis, who was described by a psychologist as immature and having mental health problems, starts offering a confession. He seems to believe it will allow him to go home.
Do you think about me telling you this is when you'll be home tonight? Today? Today, I doubt it. Today, you doubt it? Now, you'll see a judge Monday. Well, then why am I lying about all this to you just so I can go home? You're not lying. I am lying to you. I am lying to you full front to your face. I am lying to you.
Drizzen says he believes McAuliffe exhibited bravery by issuing the pardon to Davis, and he hopes it will lead to pardons in other pending cases around the country.
I'm hoping that this will inspire other governors, police officers, prosecutors, and defense attorneys to do the same kind of digging.
I spoke with Davis's attorney, Stephen Rosenfeld, today. He and Davis were unable to speak with us on camera because of an arrangement with a national news program on a competing network. I also reached out to Albemarle Police for a response. In a statement, Chief Steve Sellers says his department uses today's best practices for interrogations. Sellers, of course, was not chief at the time of the crime. Live in the Newsplex, Courtney Stuart, CBS 19 News.
A special report tonight. Robert Davis spent more than a decade behind bars for a crime he didn't commit.
In December, he was pardoned for a 2003 double murder of a mother and son in Crozet, and he spoke with CBS 19's Courteney Stuart for the first time since his release.
A walk outside on a snowy day. It's one of many things Robert Davis couldn't enjoy during the 13 years he spent in prison before he was pardoned by the governor in December. He says life behind bars was rough.
Being away from my family and freedom, living in close quarters without any privacy. Food's horrible, you know. All of it was bad.
These days, life is looking up for Davis. The food's better. He has an apartment and a part-time job at a local deli, but he hopes his story will help shed light on false confessions and spare others similar suffering.
I'm hoping it'll change the viewpoints of people and change the policies of police practices.
Davis was an 18-year-old Western Albemarle High School student when two other teens named him as an accomplice in the murders of a Crozet mother and her 3-year-old son. During a 6-hour interrogation, Davis insisted he was innocent dozens of times. He appeared to be exhausted and confused as the interrogation wore on.
Am I the killer? Is that what people say? Am I the killer?
He eventually confessed after former Albemarle detective Randy Sneed lied to him about evidence police had collected. Multiple experts say it was a classic false confession. Davis's accusers admitted they lied about his involvement, and Governor Terry McAuliffe agreed Davis should be released. Davis's case was the subject of a Dateline episode on Valentine's Day. Watching the interrogation video of himself as a terrified 18-year-old was painful, Davis says.
It was hard for me to watch, you know. It was disturbing.
Although Davis is out of prison, the convictions still hang over him because he received a conditional pardon. He must wear an ankle bracelet and a GPS monitor. He has an 11 p.m. curfew and cannot leave the state. Davis expresses gratitude to his attorney, Steve Rosenfield, who worked for years to get Davis's freedom.
He's not done fighting for me because we got to go for the absolute pardon to keep my name cleared completely.
In the meantime, though, Davis says he's focusing on the future.
I can't live in the past. That's why I'm not bitter. I'm not angry. Because if I wanted to be that, I'd probably be sick all the time because that's what bitterness and anger brings.
Albemarle County Police Chief Steve Sellers joined the department after the Davis case, but he says the department has revised its interrogation practices. They do now discourage detectives from lying to people during interrogations, but it is still allowed. Continuing coverage now, part 2 of our story on Robert Davis. He's the man who was pardoned for a crime he didn't commit. Tonight, Courteney Stuart spoke with Davis's mother about the pain of the past 13 years and a message she wants other parents to hear.
Sandy Seal worked hard to raise her children well, but she's tormented by a lesson she didn't teach her son before he was interrogated during a double homicide investigation in 2003.
I didn't think to talk to him about, hey, if you're ever pulled over by the police or taken into the police, you just say, I want a lawyer, and they don't have to say anything else.
Robert Davis was convicted of murder because he confessed at the end of a 6-hour interrogation. Experts say it was a textbook false confession, and Governor Terry McAuliffe granted Davis a conditional pardon in December. But Seal says the ordeal has taken a toll on the entire family.
It made my son have to go spend 13 years in jail to prove that he was innocent. And then it made my youngest son a victim because he didn't have his brother to grow up with. And it made me a victim because I didn't have my son, and me and Robert, we've always been tight.
Davis's attorney, Steve Rosenfield, also wants to change laws about police interrogations to prevent detectives from lying. Like Seal, he says parents should tell their children not to talk to police if they're being questioned.
They have a right to ask for a lawyer, and once they invoke that right, the police department is obligated to stop the interrogation.
Rosenfield says he's outraged that detectives in Albemarle and in Virginia are still allowed to lie during interrogations.
The state hasn't adopted any standards which would have prevented the kind of conduct that they committed against Robert. All of those are still in play.
Albemarle County Sheriff Chip Harding has been working to improve interrogation policy across the state. One bill he supported would have required all interrogations to be videotaped. That bill failed. He says Virginia should study better interrogation techniques from around the country and even the world.
That's why I'm saying we need to get professionals in a room to look at best practices and evidence and decide.
Reporting in Albemarle County, Courteney Stuart, CBS 19 News.
Now, Davis's attorneys are still working to grant him a full pardon. There's also a fundraiser this weekend for Davis. We've got information on how you can donate at newsplex.com. We start with a CBS 19 exclusive. The prosecutor who helped convict Robert Davis more than a decade ago is standing by that conviction and says Davis should not have been let out of prison.
Davis was released by a governor's pardon in December after serving more than a dozen years. Courteney Stuart spoke with the former prosecutor who put Davis away to hear what he has to say. Courtney?
Thanks, Dan and Tara. Jim Camblos was the Albemarle County Commonwealth's attorney who prosecuted Robert Davis. He says he still believes Davis is guilty of the crime, despite the governor's pardon and numerous experts who said Davis's confession was coerced.
As Robert Davis's family and friends celebrate his release from prison, the man who led the charge to put him there doesn't share their happiness.
I believe he's guilty. If I didn't, I wouldn't have prosecuted him in the first place. I think he should be in jail, but he's not. And I hope that he does well with the rest of his life and becomes a productive member of society.
Jim Camblos was Albemarle Commonwealth's attorney in 2003. He prosecuted Davis and 2 other teens in the murders of a Crozet mother and her toddler son. Numerous experts have said Davis gave a textbook false confession during a 6-hour interrogation. The 2 other teens who accused Davis in the crime have since said they were lying. Camblos notes that Republican Governor Bob McDonnell denied Davis's first petition for clemency.
There was a change of administration. Governor McAuliffe is a very liberal governor. The Attorney General is a very liberal Attorney General, and they were successful this time. I think it's really a matter of politics.
Davis's attorney Steve Rosenfield scoffs at that idea. He says McDonnell's administration never investigated the case, and McAuliffe agreed to give the case a close look. Davis says he's not angry with Camblos. He had a job to do, Davis said, and he did what he thought was right. It was wrong. It's kind of messed up that he still thinks I'm guilty. But his attorney is less forgiving.
Jim Camblos's judgment is questionable. He's got an ego that would compel him to allow an innocent person to stay in prison just so that he would not look bad.
I thought he knew me better than that. I would never want to see an innocent man in prison rather than admit that I was wrong. Ever.
I reached out to Governor McAuliffe for his comment on the allegation that the Davis pardon was politically motivated. I haven't heard back. Live in the Satellite Center, Courtney Stuart, CBS 19 News.
Adjusting to life outside prison after nearly 13 years is difficult, and this weekend, Robert Davis, his brother, and other local musicians holding an event to help out the man who was recently freed. Courtney Stuart has more.
Local musician Lester Seal is hoping a music event this weekend can help his older brother, Robert Davis, adjust to life outside prison.
All the proceeds, all the alcohol that's sold, everything, when you come in the door, all of that money goes towards Robert to help him get back on his feet.
Davis spent 13 years in prison on a double murder conviction before he was pardoned by Governor Terry McAuliffe in December. Experts say he gave a false confession and his accusers admitted they lied. With no savings and no job training, Davis is facing a hard road. That's why Seal and other musicians are playing a benefit concert on Saturday at the Ix property downtown. There will also be speakers from the Innocence Project at UVA.
This is an opportunity to the community to come together and help support something that's positive, and also to educate people about stuff that they're not really aware of.
Trumpeter John Dirth says he'll be there to show his concern about what happened to Robert Davis and to support fellow musician Seal.
I think what happened to his brother is so typical of what can go on in this country with our supposedly clean and beautiful legal system, which actually is about who can argue best. There doesn't seem to be enough interest in finding out what's actually going on.
Reporting in Charlottesville, Courtney Stuart, CBS 19 News.
Robert Davis says he's cherishing his freedom and looking towards the future after receiving a full pardon from the governor. Davis was convicted of double murder in the 2003 slayings of a mother and son in Crozet. Experts said his confession was coerced and his accusers admitted they lied. Last year, Governor McAuliffe granted a conditional pardon that let Davis go home, but he had to wear an ankle bracelet and still had the conviction hanging over him. Now his record will be totally clear.
Personally, it means that I no longer have to wear the stigma of being a convicted felon. You know, I'm free to do what I want, travel and all that stuff, you know, just to live a normal life.
His attorney said Davis may now pursue compensation from the state for the years he spent wrongly locked up. Davis hopes to become a public speaker. He says he wants to share his story.
A man who spent most of his adult life behind bars for a double murder he did not commit has been fully vindicated by the governor.
Governor Terry McAuliffe has granted a rare full pardon to Robert Davis. Our Courtney Stuart joins us now live with more. Courtney.
Hey, Tara and Sefe. The governor gave Robert Davis a conditional pardon last December that allowed him to leave prison, but he still had restrictions and a criminal record. This changes all of that. I spoke with Davis and his attorney about what this full pardon means and what comes next.
I've been given a full pardon. I'm a free man.
A Facebook Live video is how Robert Davis broke the news on Friday night that Governor Terry McAuliffe had given him a full pardon, declaring him innocent in the 2003 murders of a Crozet mother and her toddler son. It's a crime for which Davis served 13 years in prison. Davis says he learned the news from his attorney, Steve Rosenfield.
When he told me that I was a free man, I just screamed at the top of my lungs.
Rosenfield says full pardons are rare, and this was a moment they'd long hoped for.
It came as just a stunning culmination of a lot of nervous times, just waiting and waiting to see whether the governor would act and when he would act.
Davis was just 18 when he confessed to the killings after an all-night interrogation by former Albemarle Police Detective Randy Sneed. Numerous experts have testified that Davis's confession was coerced and noted that Davis had denied being involved dozens of times before finally caving to police pressure. Years later, Davis's accusers admitted they lied when they implicated him. Last year, Governor McAuliffe granted Davis a conditional pardon. It got Davis out of prison, but he wasn't really free since he had to wear an ankle bracelet and he couldn't travel. That changed on Friday. Davis's mother, Sandy Seal, says her son's ordeal has cost the whole family.
We were victims too, and people don't really think about it in that way. They think about poor woman and poor child, and yes, I feel for them and the mother, but I lost my son too when they took him.
Rosenfield says the absolute pardon means Davis may be eligible for compensation from the state, and he's also considering legal action.
I am exploring whether we may have a cause of action against Albemarle County or specific police officers within Albemarle County.
Police Chief Ron Lance declined to comment. Davis says he's taking his newfound freedom one step at a time.
Personally, it means that I no longer have to wear the stigma of being a convicted felon, you know. I'm free to do what I want, travel and all that stuff, you know, just to live a normal life.
Davis says he hopes to start speaking publicly about false confessions and wrongful convictions. He hopes some good can come out of what happened to him. Live in the Newsplex, Courtney Stuart, CBS 19 News.